Welcome to the second video of this module. We're going to be talking about fear and how to become the master over your fears. To become the master over your fears, we first have to identify our fears. So that's what we're starting off with. The law of exposure states the following. It says, once something is seen, it cannot be unseen. Once you see it, you'll become aware of what holds most people back, which is fear. Fear is the invisible power that largely determines our behavior and the choices that we make. In this module, we'll show you how to identify it, how to understand it, which eventually neutralizes it, and we'll also show you how to get rid of it. But do understand that everything you fear controls you. If you fear losing your girl, for example, right, you will place importance on her. You won't act right, you won't be able to set boundaries, and she will ultimately control you and lose respect for you. Now, this is assuming most of you are guys, which should be the case. The same obviously applies to girls. Same with fear. If you fear losing money, you will attempt to hoard it. It will control you. You will create distance between you and the reception of it, making you lose more, and you simply won't be effective in business. Now, there are two primary types of fear we have to make a distinction between. The first one is fear, which is a direct fear. It's where there is a direct fight or flight response. Someone scares you or you're in a serious, life-threatening situation where there is a serious threat to your existence. The other one is anxiety. So anxiety is a more subtle fear. This fear is directed towards a certain event that might take place in the future, but more often than not, it's not actually likely to happen. Everybody has fear or anxiety on occasion, but in some cases, these fears can take on such a strong form that people start to live their daily lives and are disturbed by them. In these cases, we speak of common phobias, right? Like fear of heights, fear of spiders, or claustrophobia, or, being scared of being in tight places. Getting in these situations triggers a fight or flight response for these people, which is unpleasant, especially because these situations are normally not that threatening, or in other words, their fear is disproportionate. To remember this, there's a great acronym, which is fear or false evidence appearing real. Nearly all of our fears are simply imaginative. Even most of our, normal fears, not necessarily our anxieties. It's often a negative visualization of a potential reality, or it's a subconscious feeling that we get around something simply because of past programming or evolutionarily being programmed. Now, the upside is that this is all behavior that we can overcome. So to do this, the first step is to become aware of what it is that we are afraid of. Now, there are 7 basic fears to be aware of. The first up is fear of poverty. Second one is fear of criticism. Third thing is fear of disease. Fourth is fear of loss of love. Fifth is fear of old age. Sixth is fear of death. And then the fear that is often at the root of it all is the fear of not being good enough. So going forward, whenever you feel anxious about anything, outside of these basic fears, something is very important to be aware of. When we feel anxious about anything, it is completely normal. It means that you are expanding yourself. It means that you are put in a situation where you have to grow, where there is some type of discomfort because the situation is new to you. If you are an entrepreneur, you are pushing yourself to be better constantly. You're constantly pushing outside of your comfort zone, treading into new territory, right? You are doing things you have never done before. You are hiring new people you've never hired before. You are taking new shots that you haven't taken before. You are developing new products that haven't been developed before. You are literally a pioneer in something. And so it would be damn near psychotic for you to not feel some anxiety in a growth-causing situation that you are likely very often in. So this ties up very nicely. Do not be afraid of situations simply because of your perception of them. What has happened with this is a simple reframe. We instead embrace that we are happy that we feel these things, because it means that we are exposed to growing ourselves, right? And if we truly accept that, there is no real failure. There is no real thing to be anxious about, because often the consequence isn't even that great. And so you don't even feel anxious. You feel excited. You feel enthusiastic about the thing that is happening. And that is all that is. It's the same thing, right? It's a different side of the same coin. Understand that the consequences of the things we feel anxious about are often tiny, like I just said. So just shoot the shot, approach the girl, shoot the message, right? Approach the person you want to be speaking to, because the first time is always going to be scary. Embrace it, feel enthusiastic, take that as your kind of baseline thing. That will greatly accelerate your progress. Okay, cool. So now that you have identified your fears, we can start to look at understanding them, dissecting them, and start to understand the underlying messages, the underlying mechanisms in which this fear shows up. Now, I first want to introduce the concept of the reptile brain to you. And you have to understand with this that the concept of the reptile brain has largely been debunked. So I'm just explaining it because this line of thinking can be useful to really understand this concept, but understand that it works differently in reality. And, as previously discussed, the subconscious is actually a lot more powerful than we think, or that this concept would give you credit, or would give it credit. Now, this conceptualization suggests that there are three main parts of the brain. So there's the human brain, or the youngest part of our brain that is responsible for rationality, logic, and sober thought, which is kind of the part of our brain that makes logical decisions. There is the mammalian brain, which is the domain of our emotions. It screens all relevant sensory information and it filters these for emotional relevancy and then compares it with stored memory and behavior based on memories. This helps us to repeat the behavior that makes us happy, such as sex, eating good food, laughing, but also then avoid unpleasant experiences, such as experiences where we previously experienced pain or sorrow or fear. The third area of the brain is the reptile brain, and this is conceptualized as the oldest part of our brain. It's an instinctive part. It automatically and instinctively responds to outside threats, to outside information that we are scanning from the environment, and it prioritizes survival and reproduction and also controls our vital bodily functions. Now, the first step to understanding our fears is to be aware of the constant power struggle between these different parts. It explains why behavior change is so hard, because we essentially develop a certain way of living that fits within our comfort zone, and then we get stuck within that comfort zone. We start to constantly repeat the same patterns, and these patterns become more and more ingrained, and our reptile brain keeps us stuck in these patterns. The same pattern might cause us to gain a few kilos or experience other drawbacks, right? Like not be able to approach women and therefore live a miserable existence without any type of romantic relationships. But at least it is safe and it is predictable. And that is what these parts of our brain prioritize, especially the reptile brain, right? So within this conceptualization, since safety is the top priority in the reptile brain, everything that is new, everything that is different, everything that is unsafe is something that the brain or the reptile brain will want to get rid of. And the problem with this, obviously, is that in entrepreneurship, pretty much everything that we are doing is in the process of growth. It's all growth driven. It's all new territory. It's all constantly pushing and stepping beyond what we have previously done, which is very counterintuitive for our brain because they're just not made for growth, for expansion, for success. They're made for survival. So closely related to this is the concept of the pain-pleasure principle. This pain-pleasure principle essentially states that everything that we do is to either avoid pain or to gain pleasure. Now, if you've caught that, that essentially means that whatever we link to pain and pleasure will literally shape our future. This is very important to be aware of. And that if we fail to control these associations, like most people, with pain and pleasure, we essentially live in the exact same way like machines would do, like animals would do, right? We don't actually make use of our higher levels of conscientiousness and just throw them to the wayside. Now, in most situations, this means the following three steps. Firstly, we shift our focus from the short term to the long term. Then secondly, we link pain to the behavior we want to stop with such great emotional intensity that we wouldn't even consider displaying it. And then third thing is we link immense joy to the behavior that we do want to display. That is essentially how we can make this shift. Approaching women is a classic example of this, okay? So not being able to approach women means lacking connections, it means having no interesting conversations, no exciting dates, a lacking sex life, and potentially never finding the person best fitted to be your future wife. Approaching, even if it fails, can be painful in the short term, but it means more learning, more data, more conversations, more confidence, and ultimately over the long term, finding true love, building close friendships, having more adventure, and ultimately being able to get into a happy relationship and potentially a marriage and or a loving family life, right? So we shift this focus from the short term to the long term, and we make it so painful that we start to see, okay, if I don't make this approach, I might miss out on this beautiful future with this other person. By reframing it in that way, it becomes a lot easier to start to take action and not be paralyzed by this fear. So, our comfort zone. After reading the above pages, I hope that it's clear to you how strong of an influence this pain-pleasure principle has on the way we live. Both the limbic brain and the reptile brain make us live in a very reluctant manner regarding success, growth, and expansion. And you should essentially see these as two superpowers of some sort that create our habits, and sadly they function as some sort of anchor that slows down our progress and essentially drags us back and keeps us stuck in that kind of routine of habits. So why do we stay in the comfort zone? Well, there's 3 reasons for this. So the first thing is habit. We just talked about this. The second thing is fear of change. And you might think, okay, why fear of change? Well, change means unknown, right? And unknown means, evolutionarily speaking, it means a threat. And so we are evolutionarily programmed to avoid that. Then the third thing is simply linking pain to leaving our comfort zone. So in reality, the thing that has to be done to achieve a desired outcome is pretty much always uncomfortable. And every human does have a huge wish for comfort. So when you don't map out what the wanted result is, what the actions are that are necessary for achieving it, you will end up spending most of your time doing comfortable actions instead of doing what is necessary to reach your goals, being very busy but not being productive and actually making progress. This is why at a broad high level, we want to map out what it is that we want to accomplish, why we want to accomplish it, what it costs us if we don't accomplish it, what actions are necessary to accomplish it. Then we need to decide if we are willing to commit ourselves to those actions, and then we want to make a clear decision on when we want to have achieved this. Now, by going through this module and filling in the worksheet around identifying your fears and understanding your fears, you should have a clear idea of the things that you are afraid of, and what they are, where they are coming from, what their benefits are, what their setbacks are, what they are costing you. And this is all very powerful to help us to start to take action, but it's only going to get us to the starting line. It is going to give us the understanding of, okay, now I know that I'm afraid of this, now we can attack it head on. We still have to do the attacking. Fear is literally cured by action. And on the other hand, fear gets larger by indecisiveness or postponing action. However, there is an important step that precedes action, namely confrontation. So the method to conquer your fears and gain trust has 3 steps. Firstly, we have to pinpoint exactly what we are afraid of. Then we have to confront ourselves with this fear and accept it. So these are the things we've kind of walked through previously. And then the third step is to simply decide to take massive action despite the fear, with the knowledge that for every fear there is a certain type of action that will lead to the defeat of it. The key, like we talked about earlier, is to just feel the fear and do it anyway. If you don't dare to do something, then you'll just have to do it afraid. Imagine that you are a person that is confident and that does that. You can try to live in some type of archetype if you have to. Feelings of fear, either way, they're not bad as long as they don't keep you from taking the steps that you need to take to get to the desired result. Now, nature has blessed us with absolute control over only one thing, which is our thoughts. Knowing this, plus the added fact that everything we create first emerges in the mind, leads us very close to the principle with which fear can be conquered. At the end of the day, you are the master of your own fate, and just like that, you are the master over your own thoughts. The most common weakness of all people is without a shadow of a doubt the habit of opening their minds to negative influences from other people and external situations. This is why we want to control our mind through building up self-discipline and habit. Either we control our mind or our mind controls us. Now, according to Napoleon Hill, the most practical method to control our mind is the habit of keeping it occupied with a clearly defined goal supported by a clearly defined plan. With all of the previous modules, you should be clear on that, but to drive it home, here's a great example of this from the Roman Emperor Julius Caesar. So Julius Caesar's clearly defined goal was the conquest of Britain in the year 54 before Christ. And his clearly defined plan was to use a surprise attack, to attack like a thief in the night and subsequently dominate with his great army. When they crossed the Channel and his legions arrived in England, he let his soldiers line up at the cliffs while some of his men then burned the remaining ships that survived the storm. Watching the waves crashing down on the cliffs, they saw that all the ships were destroyed, and Caesar literally said, "There's only two options now, either we win this battle and we take the land, or we will be wiped off the face of the earth." That left them with only one viable option, to push onward and to conquer, and so that's what they did, and that is how strong Caesar's mind was. Now, to really drive this home, there is a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson who says, "Fear defeats more people than anyone or anything in the world." Really take this stuff seriously, perhaps ponder on it, go through it a few times, maybe do the exercise again at a later stage and see if you discover some more fears, and that should go a very long way. Now, it shows in multiple studies that we perform better when we don't have a safety net, so be sure to throw the smallest negative thoughts in flames and make yourself the way back to uncertainty and indecisiveness impossible. It can be beneficial to have some type of net, as in that you have some type of security to fall back on, because that reduces the importance, like we talked about in Module 9, where you don't want to place unnecessary importance on something because that's going to push it away from you. But outside of that, having the basic measurement, like basic necessities taken care of, having anything that is not the main plan is a complete waste of time and is going to hold you back over the long term. If you want to be brave and you aren't brave yet, just act as if you are already brave, and then do this with all of your willpower, and courage will take fear's place instead. And then over time, you will be brave. So fill in the third part of the worksheet, and then we will get to the last part. So the last part is to replace the fear with faith. Fear is simply an ungrateful state. So decide to act from a higher operational level. Try to make it habitual to operate from love and to operate from faith and servitude for other people. It is said that doubt and fear are the only enemies of dreams and vision. So believe all the way, unquestionably, because certainty will give you everything you want in life, and uncertainty is simply procrastination stopping us from that. Worry is procrastination as well. Being is now, and you can change your state immediately. Being is now, and you can change your state immediately. So if you're in doubt, just act as if you believe. If you're not confident, imagine how it would be to be confident and then act that way. And stay persistent and you will be it. Now, worry is also fear, which just puts negative images in your mind. And at the end of the day, life is images of the mind expressed. Understand that before any problem occurs, it is already solved, because even before you ask, it is given. And remember that your best comes from your worst, and the worst comes before the best. So see painful times and uncertainties as growth potential. We highly recommend you to do these sections 1 week at a time, to reflect and to be conscientious, to ponder, to journal on these things and see how fears are impacting you before you move on. So I'd recommend you to do this and then plan next week to start going through the ownership module, and then maybe a week later the commitment module, so you really get the most out of this. Either way, can't control your actions, but that would be my recommendation. Wishing you all the best to your growth, and I'll see you in the next week or video.